Right, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Dukefield Energy's webinar with a market update and guest speaker from Coral Energy. Just a few bits of housekeeping, if I may. Mics and cameras are currently off at the minute. Any questions can be asked via the chat function. The webinar is being recorded as well and will be available on our YouTube channel, a link to which will be sent out not long after the webinar is concluded. And for anybody that requires or wants access to the slides themselves, please do just let us know and we'll be happy to send those over. Today's agenda, obviously I appreciate time is of the essence. We've got a bit of an update about our new framework, a bit of background about Dukefield Energy for anybody that doesn't know anything about us, an update on the energy markets themselves, what it's like to work with us and some of the services that we offer, the tender process and how that works, and then additional services as well, and why choose Dukefield Energy. We've then got, I suppose, a brief interlude to ask questions of myself and anything about Dukefield related, and then we move over to Leigh Hitchens from Coral Energy, who will talk about his company, and then talk about display energy certificates as well. There was some communication sent out that stated that Leigh would talk about heat decarbonisation, but Leigh's actually going to be talking about display energy certificates. And then there's a quick period for questions at the end for Leigh as well. So moving swiftly into the new framework. So our new framework is hosted by the University of Essex, and the university appointed Dukefield Energy as its managing agent for the provision of utility supply and energy management solutions framework. Now, that's its full Sunday name. We just refer to it as the framework, but I suppose the main encompassing part of our framework is that it's a fully compliant route to market. Now, the framework itself comprises of 4 lots. Lot 1 is the provision of electricity supply, or just electricity as we refer to it. Lot 2 is provision of natural gas supply. Again, we just refer to that simply as gas. Lot 3 is supply of metered and supply of metered and unmetered water and metered and unmetered wastewater. And then finally, lot 4 is energy management solutions. Now, the suppliers on there, we have British Gas, who are on lots 1 and 2. Brook Green Supply are on lots 1, 2 and 4. Ecotricity are on lots 1 and 2. And SSE are on lots 1 and 2 as well. And just to, I suppose, add to this particular framework, we still have the existing framework that runs alongside this as well, and DRACs are on lot 1 of that. So that gives us in total 5 electricity suppliers and 4 gas suppliers. So a very good plethora of quotes from a good number of customers are obtainable there. Hello. Sorry, I thought someone said something. So yeah, as well as that, we've got lot 3, which is water. So our water supplier is Water Plus, and lot 4 is Core Energy as well as Brook Green. So lot 4, a little bit of background on lot 4. That covers quite a lot, ranging from heat pumps to solar panels, wind, electric vehicle charging, and energy efficiency solutions. As well as that, lots 1 and 2, we are able to obtain fully fixed quotes, flexible quotes, fully green quotes or brown quotes. So there's a good range of things that we're able to obtain from those suppliers. Moving on to Dukefield Energy. So who are we? We're a full service consultancy. What that means is end to end. So anything from procurement right the way through to, as I mentioned, energy management and things like that. We've got extensive experience across the team. I myself have been in the industry for almost 10 years now. I've worked at a supplier and another sort of third-party intermediary in the industry, as have a lot of my colleagues worked at various points within the energy industry. We provide end-to-end management of all energy requirements, as I say, be it from procurement right the way through to energy efficiency solutions and everything in between. we take a completely transparent approach, so we don't have any terms and conditions. So, by signing in with us, there's no obligation to then stay with us for a prolonged period of time. You don't have to serve us any termination well in advance of any conclusion of the contract or anything like that. The terms and conditions are between yourself and the supplier that you choose to take a contract out with. And every customer has a dedicated point of contact, and I think that's quite an important one as far as we're concerned. A lot of people a lot of competitors, I should say, will claim to have that for their customers, but you often get customers waiting waiting for responses to emails or on the phone for a prolonged period of time, whereas we kind of pride ourselves in having that direct approach into us. The markets themselves. I'll touch on the reports that we offer. So we've got a daily market insight report that some customers like to see. We do have a slightly condensed version of this that basically just touches about the key drivers for the markets that day. We monitor the energy markets on a daily basis and send out daily and weekly reports. And as well, we do hold monthly webinars. This is the first one we've done this year, just as we were waiting to get the new framework off the ground. What we're looking to do, between now and the end of the calendar year, barring August, obviously August being the summer break for most people, we'll be looking to hold webinars monthly from here on in. So any points or any topics that customers wish for us to present on, we're more than happy to hear those. We've got a few, again, similar to today, guest speakers lined up. It's just about facilitating those and making sure that we can get those booked in a timely manner. And then as well, you may or may not have seen the monthly updates that we send out as well. That one was from our update in January. Markets were a very good point back then. And again, leads me into the next bit, really, the markets themselves at the moment. So far in 2024, we have been quite positive. However, May saw a sharp rise in wholesale costs, and June has seen them settle somewhat. So this first graph gives an overview of the markets over the last 2 years. Obviously, over on the left-hand side here, going back to November of 2022, when the markets were particularly high. When you compare that to this year, February in particular, there's a stark contrast there. Obviously, the high point being sort of £220 a megawatt hour, right the way down to what we saw back in February, around about £55 to £60 a megawatt hour. So a substantial decrease. But what we've seen over the last couple of months, really, as I say, in May in particular, quite a sharp rise in price, which has been unfortunate. It's kind of bucked the trend we were hoping to see from January through to February of markets coming down, and obviously customers being able to save some money. Prices are still, better than what they were this time last year. That's quite obvious, but we were hoping for better. So going into the next one will give us a 3-month graph. So as I say, February into March time being quite low, and then May being quite high. But this has been the period or the margins in which the markets have settled at, really, between £85 and £90 a megawatt hour. This is primarily looking at October 2024 contracts. It's the same pattern, really, for if you were looking at maybe March time next year or even October next year as well. But the price in which the energy is being traded at, it will be marginally different, but they all tend to follow the same trend, if that makes sense. So what are the drivers for the markets at the minute? So we started 2024, as I say, with large decreases. There's been volatility in recent weeks caused by conflicts or political tensions, should we say, in Israel and Iran. As well as that, Russia-Ukraine still plays a large factor. And then unplanned outages to Norwegian gas fields. The average unit rate, I suppose this is quite a key one. Average unit rate so far in 2024 is much cheaper than in 2023, as I mentioned earlier. Unit rates probably anywhere between 20 and 22 pence on electricity, and anywhere between 4 and 6 on gas. Underlying uncertainty still remains for UK and European storage. That's always a key driver in price. So the key number really for UK and Europe is around about 90% of gas storage to be full, if that makes sense. for the winter months. What we've seen last winter and the winter before is quite a mild winter. So what that means is that storage isn't eating away at as much, but there's still fears that, you know, if we have a very cold winter across the UK and Europe, that storage needs to be adequate enough to cope. I believe storage levels at the moment are around about 72-73%. So we're still well on on track to meet 90%, more or less by the end of September. But it still plays a large part in wholesale costs. As well, kind of hot off the press recently, this one, there's further sanctions against Russia, including a target on their gas exports, primarily LNG between ships in EU ports. So obviously, we don't get gas directly from Russia anymore, but there's still LNG is exported from Russia. So there's a sanction against that. So again, that will likely have an impact on prices. Working with Dukefield Energy, so I suppose from a start to finish, so if you were to email in and request a little bit more information about us and what we offer, we would normally start with a sort of kick-off meeting to understand the customer's requirements, be it meters specifically or numbers of, right the way through to things like renewal dates and any bespoke, I suppose, reporting that's required. There's also any objectives you might have. You might tell us that you only want green energy, so that's something we can factor in when we request quotes and develop a bespoke strategy. As I mentioned earlier, you might be keen on looking at flexible contracts or fully fixed. If we were looking at flexible, there's appetite for risk to take into consideration as well. And then we always advise on the best recommendation for you guys as well. We're not going to try and sell you something that you clearly don't want if it's more beneficial for us, if you see what I mean. All requirements considered as well, like I say, green energy, AMR upgrades, any specific payment terms that you might want, or anything else weird and wonderful that you want to throw into the mix. So that's just a small, sort of flow chart as to how it works. The initial introduction is as I say, understanding your requirements, a market update as well as to where we're at, and things like that. Stage 2 is, hopefully if we get that far, is you sending us information about the meters. We'll then naturally have some questions about anything weird and wonderful within there. Once we've figured out everything that we need in order to create the tender, we send that off to our suppliers. There's normally around a 5 to 7 working day turnaround on that. Again, the more notice we can give to suppliers, the more we'll likely bid on the business, if you see what I mean. And then from there on in, obviously we send the quotes over to you as a like-for-like comparison against your current costs. After that, any refreshes, as we call them, can be done with normally 2 or 3 working days notice. Again, the more notice we can give to suppliers, the higher probability we get of them giving us quotes when we ask for them. Normally the way it works, after maybe 1 or 2 rounds of pricing, it's normally the same suppliers that are going to be the cheapest, so we start discounting maybe some of the more expensive suppliers, and then narrow it down to maybe 1 or 2 suppliers with a view to signing off on a specific date. Again, worth mentioning as well that all quotes are valid until 4 p.m. We normally get them at by around 11 o'clock in the morning. Obviously we'll endeavour to send them over as quickly as we can to give you the maximum amount of time to review and potentially sign. But obviously that comes with its own pitfalls. If you've done this exercise yourself, you'll know what they are. Again, the tender process. So this is what our comparison will look like. So on the left-hand side, we've got quite a broad overview, really, comparing current costs with projected costs over 12, 24, and 36 month periods. What we like to see is everything in red. Red means saving, and that's certainly the way it looks at the moment. As I say, if unless anyone's coming to the end of maybe a 3 or 4 year contract, more often than not, we're able to present quite a decent saving, with the markets being okay at the moment. Then moving on to the image on the right hand side, that's the individual meter points with their own usage and unit rates as well, giving a projected annual spend for each of those as well. Additional services, so I won't go through all of these fully, but hopefully they're all something that people can kind of relate to. So additional services, there's quite a broad spectrum of them. The most popular or common at the minute, either new connections or change of tenancies, so we can assist with those. Again, any bespoke reporting or monthly reporting that people want, we're more than happy to facilitate that. Or even mimic or copy whatever you've got from your existing provider at the moment. We're more than happy to kind of build that into our system and get something sent out to you on a regular basis. Why choose Dukefield Energy? The key one for us is the first two bullet points. I would say we're fully transparent. There's no hidden costs or charges. We collect our commission by way of rebate from directly from the supplier, so you don't need to pay us anything directly. We'll always advise what that commission rate is when you ask. So normally what we do, once we've ascertained, the number of meters and the volume that we're talking about, we'll then feed that into our commission matrix and then let you know what that is. We're limited on the framework to 0.8 pence per kilowatt hour. That's quite high in my opinion. We never go that high. So I suppose just by way of information, I suppose that's what we're capped at. We always advise what is right for the customer from the very start. So what we mean by that is we're not going to say to you, you need to sign immediately because X, Y, Z is going to happen. We're always going to say, hang on a minute, something's happening. We think things are going to get better. We advise holding off, or even if it's duration, we might say 12 months is the best option. We could easily say that 4 or 5 years is the best duration and get some cash in our pocket, but that's not the way we want to operate and be perceived by customers. Again, no hard sales pitches. We're not going to pick up the phone every day trying to get you to sign into something that isn't right for you or the right timing. The needs of the customers are always put first. We're a safe pair of hands and trusted within the industry. Dukefield Energy itself has been operating, again, primarily in the public sector or education sector, specifically for around about 20 years. And I'd like to think we've gained a good reputation in that time as well. We take the work out of procuring your energy contracts. Again, it does sound a bit cliche, but we do try and simplify and make things as easy as possible when it comes to the actual procurement process and putting pen to paper. We like to think that that's quite a simplified and streamlined approach. And again, educational specialists, competitors of ours don't understand the public sector and education sector like we do. We understand that things take time from governors meetings and getting approval for sign off and things like that. And that leads me on to any questions. Appreciate that was quite a quick whiz through of the market. Of our update. I was quite limited on time there. So any questions, please feel free to use the chat function and I'll be happy to answer. I don't know if I can actually see the chat function with my screen being shared. Yeah, if we're good there, I think we can move on to Leigh.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. I hope everybody can hear me okay. And initially, apologies for my very loud, summery shirt. When I put this on this morning, I didn't think about what that might look like in front of a camera. So apologies if anybody's blinded. Hello, good afternoon. My name's Leigh Hitchens. My company is Coral Energy Limited. Do you want to just bring that up for me, Jonny? What we do, we are a specialist energy management and legislative compliance business, and we work both across public sector and commercial businesses. What I've highlighted up there is predominantly for public sector, but it gives you a flavour of what we do. So we do display energy certificates, DECs, EPCs, and I'll touch upon the difference between the two. We do undertake heat decarbonisation projects, which is at the forefront of many public sector organisations at the moment. We offer Salix funding support for those that want it, although the Salix process is a bit of a lottery. We will undertake energy management surveys, analysis and reports. We also do a lot of work around the commercial sector in terms of Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme, which is a legal compliance for very large organisations in the UK, which is currently ongoing. And what we fundamentally do with Dukefield is partner with them for non-procurement projects. As a business, we don't do that. We leave that to the experts. So what we're trying to do is actually reduce people's energy, in essence. Next slide. Unlike Jonny, which is terrifying, I've actually got 35 years energy experience. I came into the industry in 1989, the year before deregulation. So I've been around primarily on the supplier side for many years. In my public sector side of things, I was at British Gas for several years and was responsible for all of public sector when I was at British Gas. So I used to go to and from government to advise on legislation and what they should be doing from British Gas's point of view, not the industry point of view. I'm accredited to do EPCs, DECs, domestic EPCs. As I said, I'm a lead assessor, which means I'm accredited by government. I'm a member of the Energy Managers Association, the Energy Institute. I'm also an accredited behaviour change practitioner, which I hate the title of, but it allows me to run education and training programs for organisations. I've also got extensive public sector knowledge, and I've got a whole team of people sat behind me. So next slide, please, Jonny. What is a display energy certificate? So it looks like the ratings that you'll see on white goods on the right hand side. It was brought in, I think it was 2008, the same time as EPCs, as part of EU legislation at that time. And what it was trying to do was to bring public sector buildings into focus. And a DEC provides a rating from A being very good to G being very poor. And as you can see on the example on the right hand side, there's a cut-off point of 100, and really that's kind of where government want ratings of buildings to be, i.e. D or above. What is important about DECs for me is that DECs take into account energy consumption, and I think that's really important because an EPC doesn't. And again, I'll touch upon that, but what it is trying to do for a public sector building is bring into focus how energy efficient that building is. Scotland doesn't actually have DECs. They kind of went straight to EPCs. Don't know why, but they did. And EPCs in Scotland, I mean, Scotland in general is much more, I think, proactive than England and Wales in trying to reduce building emissions. So I think that's why they went down the EPC route. Any new provider to undertake a display energy certificate assessment has to visit site. So that's a legal requirement. So if you were to come to us, we would need to visit and undertake an up-to-date survey to establish how that building is performing. Renewals from the same assessor do not need to visit due to the validity period of existing DECs. Next slide, please, Jonny. So a DEC or an EPC, and I get asked this quite often, DECs are for public sector, an EPC is required for commercial properties, but public sector organisations can actually have both. So we do have some clients that have, for example, both a sports hall and a theatre that they lease for commercial reasons. So have an EPC because they can lease that out, but also a DEC because that's a legal requirement. An EPC is valid for 10 years so long as no alterations are made, whereas DECs are valid for only 1 year as long as the building is in excess of 1,000 metre squares. 250 square metres are valid for 10 years. So a sort of smaller DEC building, if you like, is kind of the equivalent to an EPC. But you can get wildly differing ratings if you compare a building between a DEC and an EPC, because the DEC takes into account consumption within that building, which I think is better. So, you know, we often see a building that has a much better DEC rating than an EPC or vice versa because of the way that particular building or facility uses its energy. Next slide. So qualifying criteria for a DEC, a display energy certificate, it must be at least a partially occupied building, public authority, for example, NHS, councils, colleges, schools. It must have a floor area in excess of 250 metres squared, and it's frequently visited by the public. As I said, DECs are valid for a year if the building gross internal area, the GIA, is in excess of 1,000 square metres, and valid for 10 years if between 250 and 1,000 square metres. DECs are now, and EPCs are now held on a government central database that anybody can access. And what is interesting actually is that since lockdown, there's an awful lot of public sector buildings out there that don't have current display energy certificates. So I don't know why that is, but it does come up quite frequently. Next slide, please, Jonny. There's a very brief schematic which outlines the approach that that public sector buildings should take. Either you're in it or you're not. There are some that are grey areas. For example, the floor area might just be borderline. It might be that it's not regularly visited by public, but generally that follows a process of how often and whether you need to undertake a DEC assessment or not. As the slides will be available, it'll be there as a catch-all afterwards. Next one, please, Jonny. So if you are visiting for the first time, an assessment needs to be undertaken, and at that point, a recommendations report or an advisory report, as it's often known, needs to be generated. It is a little bit subjective in that it's based upon the data that is input. So if, for example, it is poor lighting, whatever HVAC systems are on site, whatever consumption is available, you go through the process, input all the data, it comes up with a rating, and we then have to put in a range of recommendations. Not all recommendations can be included because there's not enough space in the process, but it gives a flavour of what could be done. The flaw in the system is that it gives you a sort of subjective or prescriptive, if you like, period of how long an implementation of a recommendation will take. That is down to the assessor to make that decision, and it also doesn't encompass any costs as part of that process. So, for example, in this example, boiler plants should be regularly tested and adjusted by experts for optimum operating efficiency. Whoever did this that wasn't me, I stress, this was just a snapshot. The impact on carbon emissions is high, but it doesn't say how long it would take for that to be implemented and the cost of all the financial benefits and indeed carbon savings that go with it. However, in my accreditation body, there is talk about this being revamped at some point and being further developed, which I think is long overdue. And that's both for EPCs and DECs. Next one, Jonny. There are penalties for not having display energy certificates. So failing to display one at all times is £500. Penalty for failing to have a current or a valid recommendations report, advisory report, is £1,000. And the fines are generally enforced by the local trading standards officers, who can repeat the penalty every 28 days of non-compliance. I suspect, like most public sector organisations, they are very stretched, but we do hear some local authorities are much more stringent than others, and it seems to be a bit hit and miss depending on where you are geographically based in the country. But the fines are there, and you can get fined for not having DEC validity. Next one, Jonny. And that's it from a DEC perspective. If there's any questions, that's who we are, that's what we do. We don't go direct to anybody. Everything we do is partnered through Dukefield. We would never undermine Dukefield in anything we do, because I don't believe that's the right way, the right behaviours, and we have that approach with everybody that we work with. So if there's any questions, please feel free to raise their hand. And that's it from me. So back to you, Jonny.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Brilliant. I'll just stop sharing my screen. Back to the webinar. Oh, we've got a question. Yes, so Lisa, thanks for your question. We'll be sharing the slides after the presentation. So yeah, to all attendees, the slides will be emailed out not long after this the webinar is finished. Yeah, if there's any more questions, please feel free. I'll stick around for a few more minutes if anyone wants to ask anything. And as well as that, please feel free to email separately or give us a call separately. If you want to discuss anything further. Take it from that then. Nobody has anything else, but as I say, yeah, feel free to get in touch. We'll be happy to answer anything. Slides will be available. The recording will be available as well shortly. So yeah, thanks very much for joining. I hope you found that useful and informative. And we hope to see you again at a future webinar. As I said earlier, any suggestions for webinars, in discussions with our water supplier to come and do a bit of a talk, a meter operator, a data collector as well, and then potentially one on electric vehicles in the coming weeks as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.